to walk into a Chabad house. Okay, you ready with a tape recorder and everything? Okay. והנה ידוע שיש בבינה עצמה בייס מדרגות. In Bina there's two levels, Bina utvuna. So Bina was already discussed, means analysis basically. The inyan atvuna hu b'chinas itpashtus or Bina. And now skip the parenthesis. Itpashtus or Bina mitzad klitosa heitiv b'kli hamekabel ha'asoga de Bina. That's the definition. So, like it said, now we'll go into the parentheses. Commotion in my bizarre, the Av and Tatoin, Hem Yisrael Sabo Tvuna, Vinikra Imatatoa. It's called, Tvuna is called the lower mother. So, what is Tvuna? Tvuna is the Pastus or Rabina Mitzad Klitosa Heta Bekliya Mekabela Soga de Bina. And by the way, this also comes dafka from the Hitbonenut.
Right.
From going over and over means that when you do this Hitbonenut till you understand it real good. If you stop there, you'll have Bina, but you won't have Tvuna.
Right.
If you go over it again, even after you do understand it real well, you're understanding it really good. If you go, even then, you keep going over it, and then it gets absorbed into the Kliya Mekabel of the Asoga, into your brain. Al ken mitposhes ba la'avia bekama inyonim nivdolim me'etzem ha'asoga. Then it can spread out, and it can go into various things that are separate from the actual understanding itself.
Right.
Vahu anikra ishtvuna. That's what it's called the ishtvuna. Kamo mayim amukim yidlem ishtvuna. The ishtvuna, it can draw out the deep waters. Ishtvuna yidlena, mayim amukim hem b'chinas amkus bina, shenishar behelem atzmius. The real depth of the bina, which remains in the helem atzmius of the concept itself. Like over here, some of these things we're talking about, the actual thing that we're talking about really remains in the helem atzmius.
Right.
But the ishtvuna, in this particular case, again, like I said, this book is always a marshal on itself, the Mittler Rebbe. Dafka the ishtvuna, Dafka the Mittler Rebbe, Yidlena can draw it out, V'yeshavena, and he draws it out from the helem. La'avia li'pashtus become ha'ivn m'shoinim, l'ravos ha'mekablim. Us.
Right.
Like, for instance, somebody who draws out very deep water from a well in order to give drink to the sheep. So there's two things you can do. You can either take each sheep and throw it into the well and then take it back out again. Or else you can take the water out and bring it to the level of the sheep.
Right.
So what happens is the ishtvuna, first of all, there has to be a ishbina. The ishbina, what he does is he goes deep into the well itself. He doesn't bring the water out. He can.
Right.
The reason he can drink the water is he's all the way down on the level of the water, in the depths.
Right.
That's why he can drink. But the sheep, it doesn't help them. The ishtvuna can take that water and bring it out from deep water to shallow water.
Right.
Like we see in actuality, like again, like we see right over here, this is the mushal on it. Anikra mayim amukim, like this book itself, which is really talking about very deep stuff, which is called the deep water of the Talumas Chochma. The aquifer is under the, that's what a well is. The well digs into the aquifer, right?
Right.
And the water in the well stays in the aquifer. Shahu b'chinas oimek hamusa ganal, sha'erech v'arechav mimeno b'achulu. The ish ba'al tvuna davka yidlena, davka the ish tvuna, over here the Mittler Rebbe, can draw it out, like from a well, with those, the dli, what do you call it?
The pail.
The pail. Pirush, what does it mean? He'll bring out to the outer light that hidden Eimek HaMusag, until a regular person who doesn't have such a deep mind like the Mittler Rebbe, like us, which in a way you think how can we understand it? Like we just said before that we don't even have enough of a das to learn Ayin Beis really properly. So in a way, I mean, and really this is stuff that even the earlier generations that had fantastic big minds and big binas and stuff like that, and they could not go into this depth.
Right.
And here we are getting this depth. Why? Because the Hitbonenut brought it out to our level, like the way that he brings out the water from the aquifer to the sheep.
Right.
Right? As if it was not deep at all. And we're learning this stuff almost, not that it's like, we say, well, it's like deep stuff. Yeah, but it's sort of like deep stuff according to American standard, like our college student. Like a regular college student could, with a little bit of explanation, could learn this. Like our the new improved Kabbalah series,
Right.
Like a guy who draws out the deep water from the well, which means basically from the aquifer. That he brings the Eimek close to the sheep. In other words, this is not the actual koyach of the bina. The koyach of the bina doesn't mean to draw out the water from the aquifer. It means to go down into the aquifer.
Right.
Like, in other words, like a guy who's with a drill. But he goes down, not only that, in order to drink, he has to actually himself go down into the depth.
Right.
That's the koyach of bina. The koyach of bina is that he goes down into there.
Right.
But the koyach hadvuna is a power that spreads out from the koyach habina. Means that if you don't have the understanding into the thing, you're not going to be able to bring it out.
Right.
It's connected. You have to have dafka the power of bina first. Lahavi oimka legiloi lamata lemekablan. To be able to bring the depth downwards to the mekablan. And by the way, in terms of these two things, bina and tvuna is the length.
Right.
Because the whole thing that he explained what the length of bina is, the power to explain it. Except the length of bina is the power to explain it to himself.
Right.
Whereas the length of tvuna is the power to explain it to somebody else. And that's the two basic things in bina, besides the fact that in bina and in tvuna there's a reichav and eirech in each one of them. But as far as the two of them, the tvuna is the eirech. And the bina is the reichav, means to spread it out, like he said before. The difference between das and bina is that bina means to spread out into all the different parts and all the different... That's a reichav.
Right.
That's the real thing of the bina, even though that in comparison to chokhmah is called the reichav and bina is called the length. So in bina is the reichav and tvuna is the length.
Right.
And by the way, that's the secret of the two Lubavitchs.
Right.
The
nun kfufa.
The nun, yeah, the like he said before, then Hitbonenut is two nuns. There's a nun, the straight nun, and the crooked nun. It says there's a nachash briach and nachash akalton. The straight snake and the serpent, sea serpent, and the crooked snake.
Right.
And the crooked snake was a female snake. And it was killed. And the straight snake is the male snake. And he was what do you call it?
Neutered.
He was left alive, but he had to be neutered. Because otherwise the tvuna itself would, he could have babies somehow, even without the female. And this also, I mean, according to this, you can explain the whole Indian, the whole Indian of the Leviathans, why Dafka Tvuna was left, and you see that the Bina was pretty much gone, and the main Indian of Bina that people have is more the applications, which is Tvuna, really. They're learning basically the applications of the physical world. Okay.
Masha'en came.
Yeah, Masha'en came Kasha'eno Ish Tvunos, when he's not Ish Tvunos, Gam Shubala Soga B'moyach the Bina, Shenikra Tafsan Achaper in the Lashna Eilam, that he has a good chap in the thing, he can grasp, means a person who has Bina but not so much Tvuna. Yuchal Liot Shasagosa Nish'eret Rak Moshe He in other words, he understands it, but it just stays, his understanding stays like just the way it is. In other words, the reason that he can drink the water is because he went down into the depths.
Right.
Shenikra ruach binosel avad means his own understanding only. V'lo yoba mimena shum hitpashtus lamanta be'inyan nivdol shechutz min etzem hasoga klal. And it will not come out into any kind of application, for instance, or any kind of explanation to somebody else outside the Etzem HaSoga. Like, for instance, this is also in societies. That's like the difference between the Greeks and the Americans.
Right.
The Greek power was a power of Bina.
Right.
And the American power is dafka the power of Tvuna. They're not so much understanders, but appliers.
Right.
So, like, for instance, there's the Greeks actually had a steam turbine engine.
Right.
There's a little thing that in the museum, it's an actual turbine engine that works on steam. But by them, it was just like these philosophers that sat around and thought thoughts.
Right.
Ish Bina. They never, ever thought of applying it to making an appliance run on it.
Right.
And this technology was really available, 2,000 years or whatever, 1,500 years?
2,000 years ago.
About 2,000 years ago, right? Yeah, more than 2,000 years ago. Right, in the Greek times. And they actually had a turbine engine. And basically they also had, certain things, they knew about how gasoline, or not gasoline, what do you call it, oil from the ground could burn and all, but they never thought once to apply it to anything.
Right.
They only thought of it in abstract Bina stuff. Wait, hold on for a minute. I have to take a call. Hold on for a second.
Yeah.
And the American specialty, a lot of these things, airplanes, the trains, and let's not just the American, but the whole Western society, modern Western society. A lot of these concepts like that, now we have cars and electricity and stuff like that.
Right.
They knew about electricity by the Greeks.
Right.
And they knew about the wheel, and they had what do you call it? Wagons with wheels, and they knew about metal, and they had a turbine engine.
Right. They could have started the Industrial Revolution 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, they had
If
really.
they would have applied it.
Really, all of these things were available. I mean, and what the industrial revolutions, like a lot of these people think, oh, we're so smart, the modern generation. It's not really true.
They're the ones who did the actual thought, and over here we're doing the application.
Yeah. In other words, a lot of these thoughts were available already before, and as a matter of fact, compared to them, really people nowadays are kind of low style, that they only think about bread and butter. As a matter of fact, the reason why the Greeks never thought of the application is they never even thought about it on such a low level. To them, it was all like intellectual.
Right.
Like pure intellect. They were like it was a pursuit of the intellect, not a pursuit of the dollar.
Right.
You know, and in America, it's dafka because the pursuit is of application. So a lot of these things that they think they did, I mean, like airplanes and stuff like that, you know, the aerodynamic theory, you know, they had kites in the old days and stuff like that. They knew about it. I mean, also they knew that birds flew.
Right.
And they had an idea how it worked.
There's even
You know,
old
it's just they
diagrams
never
of, like,
tried to
flying
put it
machines.
together into an application. Why? Because they were into Bina and they had nothing to do with Tuna.
Right.
So you can have a person where the whole thing, and we see not just a person but even whole societies, where the whole thing stays into the Bina, and it doesn't come even a Pashtus out of it at all. Even though really he might be a bigger Baal Bina than the Baal Tfuna.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Like a lot of these Americans, like the Wright brothers and people like that, and Edison and people like that, they were not really such great philosophers on such a high intellectual level like the Greek philosophers really. They're really, in terms of, if a Greek philosopher would have met any of them, he would have considered him a grubber mensch.
Right.
You know, that's what you think about. Not refined upper things. You think about how to make a better horse carriage.
Right.
You know, who cares about horse carriages? We care about intellect. So they would actually consider this guy a lowlife.
Right.
But nonetheless, you can have a person where he has more tvuna, even though he doesn't have so much bina. But nonetheless, the advancements in tvuna also come dafka from the bina shababina, dafka from the analysis of the thing.
Right.
וגם שיש בהשגה ערך וריחא ועמק הנ"ל, הכל הוא רק בעצם ההשגה כמו שהיא. Even the thing of the explanation downwards is really mostly to himself, not really to others. To explain to somebody else is dafka the inyan of tvuna.
Right.
כמו שהיא, אבל לא שיתגלה למטה בעניין נבדל, which is, the inyan nivdal is also the inyan of a mashal, is to reveal the thing into a inyan nivdal.
Right.
That's a mashal, right? Umekol sheken oimik hamusag, and especially the oimik hamusag harenishar be'oimka behelem la'atzma. It stays deep inside of itself, like by the Greek philosophers. Nothing actually came out of it.
Right.
And not only nothing came out of it, but they didn't even really explain it to the regular people. Like, that's another thing. In America, the whole thing is you have to explain it to everybody.
Right.
Everybody should understand. Even a stupid guy, he has to go to school and learn it, you know.
Right.
But over there, they didn't think that it was just like for the elite.
Right.
It was just a few elite, and they were happy to think about these things, and they never thought that they should explain this to the guy who's working in the marketplace.
Right.
וכן הערך והריחא, even the length and the width, הכל בעצם ההשגה כמו שהיא במקום הלבד. לדוגמה לכל זה, הנה אנו רואים בעמק הפלפול, בתלמוד, בתיימים, בסבורס רבס, כך וכך, גם שבואים בהשגה דבינה, אבל לא יוכלו עדיין להוציא לעיר מעצם השכל איזה פסק דין חייב וזכאי. Like there's people who can have a whole pilpul and they understand all the different svaras, but they can't really apply it to anything.
Right.
And really, in a way, the power of Tvuna has a higher root than the power of Bina. Because to bring it out, really you have to, in a way, understand it deeper than the original understanding.
Right.
And really, you see that even though the Greek philosophers, in one way, they were greater than the modern scientists, to the point where they would consider the modern scientists Dr. Grubbe mentioned, but the fact that the modern scientists went and applied it into stuff finally gave them an actual deeper understanding into the thing than really the Greek philosophers had with their Bina.
Right.
So that really right now they understand some of these inyanim that even though they had the theoretical thing back there, but we understand it better even though we're not such big theoreticians.
Right.
But because we applied it, so we ended up understanding the principles even better than they did. And even by the Greeks, you see that the big special thing of the story of the smart Greek is dafka on the Tvuna, not on the Bina. You know the Eureka story?
Right.
With Archimedes.
Right.
He was basically really just one of these Greek guys that used to sit around and think stuff.
Right.
He never tried to apply any of these things. And the king had a problem and he had to come up with an application for it. And then there came the whole thing of Eureka. The Eureka is like the whole thing of understanding deeper into the thing.
Right.
That because he had to apply it, therefore he understood somehow deeper into the thing. And came up with a principle of the displacement of water according to the mass and stuff like that.
Right.
So there could be something on it, somebody understands the Talmud, but like the big poskim, like the Rambam and stuff like that, could actually apply it to an actual psak din chayav zakai.
Right.
Well, the hainu shelo yuchal lohitzi mitoch hasvara eza chiyuv al pi zeh seichel. V'lo eza schus al pi zeh seichel. Like you can learn the whole thing in terms of, Elam Metzius or whatever you want to learn in Talmud, but to actually paskin, you won't be able to do.
Right.
Ki adayin ein ha-sechel v'asvora rak haskola sichlis levad, bilti yimatzu imena shum itpashtus ba'atayis l'inyan nivdal imena. Lo shuhu, in other words, and what he's saying here is the shuhu l'chayev al yada al liskos al yada, which is the inyan of Chesed and Gvura, meaning the Chesed and Gvura does not come out from Bina, it comes out from Tvuna.
Right.
The hareze kmo davar ha'hiyuli, and it's just a hiyuli. Shalom neida adayin ma yimotze mimeno ma yaseba. It's just like an idea, but nobody knows what will come out of it and what he can do with it. Blosh nidish, the muskel line, kmo shahu, ken mit im nish ton kein zach. He can't do nothing with it. To keren l'schus or l'chayv, to be mate, to either schus or chayv.
Right.
V'amna Chayach Advuna shemitpashes mimoyach habina Haynu masha b'yachol d'lavi etzem ha'soga lepchinat itpashus lemata mimena b'kol inyan nivdal imena. All the chiyov, all the schus, all the itpal b'leiv, like in other words, he knows that this is a thing that it will bring a itpalus from it. They can laviyab machshov kama ivnim sheinim, and this is what he's starting up, what he's going to discuss later in the book, that the letters of machshov come out from malchus of tvuna.
Right.
Hulu, and that's where we're going to stop because the crew is going to come in any minute now, and now he's starting up a whole new thing of design tachtonis to Bina.
All right.
in Parak Bay.
We're on the second page, right?
Yeah, we're on the second page.
Yeah. So,
V'amnam? Is that where we're holding?
about like a third of the way down, Klapi Chut or Klapi Chayiv.
This is where we are.
Right. So, he explained up to now that Tvuna is the power of Bina to spread out, and that means that he can bring the Etzem HaSoga. One thing he says Lamata Mimena, and he says Bekol Dover Nivdol Himena, and also into the Midos and stuff like that. However, the power of Tvuna really, it's one of the Leviosins. It can go up also. The same like Bina can go up. Like he says, in Bina itself is Bina and Tvuna. Tvuna is really a full Bina all by itself. And it can go up also. So basically, actually, the power of Chochma Shebabina originates in Tvuna. You know what Chochma Shebabina is? Chochma Shebabina is to discover a new thing within the same thing.
Right, Abdesad.
That's really, in a way, the same inyan as Tvuna. It originates from Tvuna. To come out the width, even though Tvuna is really a length, but when it goes up, the width really is a new thing. That the power of Bina in the Etzem of the Inyan is spreading out to a new thing in the same Inyan.
Right.
And like he said over there, that the power of Chochma of Bina relates to the power of Bina of Chochma, which is Lahavin Dover Mitoyes Dover, which is also Inyan of Tvuna.
Right.
Not only that, what do they call a Bina Shebachachma? And Novoin. And Novin means somebody who has Tvuna.
Right.
That's what they call him. They don't call him a Maven Chacham or something like that. They call him a Novin. Because to understand something from inside of something is really Tvuna going up.
Right.
So the same thing like the power of Bina Shebabina is the one that activates all the powers, including Tvuna, but the thing of the repetition, of going it over and over and over again, to the point where you have the Klita, the thing, like you said, the levels is first is Bina Shebabina, and then there's Chochma Shebabina, how the levels go up, right? Now he's talking how the levels go down.
Right.
But the Chochma Shebabina comes dafka from the Klita.
Right.
It doesn't really come from the Bina, because the Bina is only into the thing itself. It's not even into a new thing in the thing. It's only to understand the concept itself. A width is already something else. And it comes dafka from the Klita. When you have a good Klita, that's when the power of Chochma Shebabina gets activated.
Right.
So really, and also the thing of the height to go up, that's also something different. That's the spreading of the Bina, and that's the general explanation, is the spreading of the Bina into other things, the spreading of the light of Bina into other things.
Including up.
Right, like you see, if you see where he says, that's the first sentence there, that Tvuna is Chinat Hitpashtus Or Habina Mitzad Klitosa Heita Bekli Hamekabel.
Right.
He doesn't say the spreading down.
Right.
He says the spreading. Spreading means in all the different directions. It's all really, that's the Inyan of Tvuna, really. Okay, so Achlika Era. So now he's starting a new thing. Achlika Era and the Reim Sheyesh B'Bina Atzma Pchinas Midos. There's the, like what he explained before was Chabad of Bina. Right. Now we're talking the Zayin Tachtonis of Bina, the Midos of Bina, and that's the 49 Sha'arim. The Nikra Midos Shebesechel Amaki Klapis Chus, Asechel Makle Klapi Chayiv. In other words, when you analyze something, you also come up with, besides the fact of understanding it, you also come up with a thing of this is a good thing or it's a bad thing.
Right.
besides just understanding the intellectual thing of exactly what it is. So, for instance, like over here, where we're learning the Chassidus, so we're also, by analyzing it, we're learning and we're coming up with a decision that this is a good thing. That's a seichel mantik lapis chus, and that's already a midah. That's not the actual seichel of what the Chassidus is. It's a decision of whether it's good or bad.
Right.
And that decision of whether it's good or bad is what's going to awaken the das, whether the das will be into the thing or against the thing.
Right.
I know, k'mo sh'amidah shebaseichel hem be'etzem ha'asoga, adayin behelam. In other words, it's not the thing that it's an actual midah, that you actually like it. It's just a mental decision that this seems like it's a good thing that I should like.
Right.
But it's a seichel. The midos of the seichel is not a midah. It's a seichel. There's a sichlim.
Right.
Aval lahavi bebchinas hizgalusam bedover nivdal k'mo loheres beinyan mikre dover ma al pi haseichel v'asvara hazois la'ates hamishpat shel ze ha'inyan lechesed ha'gvur sheboi davka hare ish tvuna davka yetzi la'or min ha'midos shebebina. In other words, in the midos shebebina, there's like basically all there is there. There's in Bina, there's 49 midos. 7 midos, whatever. So, you know, like in Fiddler on the Roof, on the other hand,
right,
it's a good thing. But on the other hand, from this svara, it's a bad thing.
Right.
And on the other hand, from that svara, it's a good thing.
Right.
So, as long as it's in the intellectual brain of Bina, there's many other hands. And you can understand that in this such and such a way it's a good thing, and in that such and such a way it's a bad thing. But in order to bring it out, but finally, what is it?
Right.
That's already tvuna. That's dafka ish tvuna. In order to come with a psak halacha, is dafka ish tvuna. And like later on, he'll explain that the real psak halacha comes from das. That's why women cannot be rabbis, poiskim, because they don't have a strong enough das. Because there has to come a time, and this is basically why women are indecisive, why they have less das. It's not really that they have less das than a man does. Actually, they have the same amount of das that a man does. But the fact that they have a bina yesera messes up their das. They always come up with another hand.
Right.
And they can't stop that thing of coming up with the other hand. In other words, like like in business courses and stuff like that, you know, there's a guy who thinks too much. He can't be a good businessman, because there has to come a time when you finally have to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you don't know all the details. There's never, you know, in Bina, there's always going to be another detail.
Right.
Details are infinite. There's
Right.
infinite details. And that's why women can never, it's not never, I mean, they can make a decision, but that's why they're kali das, because they always come up with another detail. And they can't make that final decision, which the moyach of das is the moyach of hataya. That you have that in the bina that tells you all kinds of things like this, like that, but finally you say, listen, I got to make a decision already.
Right.
And the decision comes sort of almost from a feeling for the thing rather than from the actual. In other words, it's influenced by all the different things in bina.
The svaros.
The svaras. And not only that, where the svaras are completely weighed to one side, it doesn't take much of a decision. Anybody can make a decision. Like, for instance, if you say, should I jump off an airplane without a parachute? You don't have to bring in a seichel of hataya and get rid of all the other hands. There ain't no other hands.
Right.
There's only one hand over there.
Unless you're suicidal.
Yeah, right. If you're suicidal, if you're suicidal, then the answer is yes.
Right.
Also, a very simple answer. Like if you say, I want to kill myself, should I jump out of the airplane now without a parachute? So the answer is yes.
Right.
Because you know, if you do this, you'll kill yourself. You know.
Right.
And if you're a normal person that doesn't want to kill himself, so the answer is no.
Right.
You don't have to have the bina itself can, you know, the thing of the seichel of hataya is where the balance is close.
Right.
And there's stuff that you don't know that you can't know right now. And you got to come up with a feeling.
Right.
Okay, but the basic thing in terms of what he's talking about here is in terms of actually making the decision in halacha is dafka the ish tvuna, means that what makes a godel like the Rambam or the Rif or somebody like that is they learned it so good that they had the klita.
Right.
Not just they understood it, they absorbed it. It became part of their brain. And therefore they can come up with a halachic decision. And they can come up with a halachic decision not just from the feeling like Rav, you know, the thing that shtik Rav. You know what the shtik?
Chassidic Rav, right.
Chassidic Rav, right. That he couldn't give you the whole explanation, and yet he came up with a decision.
Right.
And even though the decision was from Chokhmah, but in the brain of Das, he was mated dafka towards that decision, and he said that's the decision. But they can come up usually with the decision out of tvuna,
right,
without having to resort to a feeling for it.
Right.
Where also midas sechel matikol v'kov do I know midas shebasechel and betzem asoga daim behelm v'lahavi b'tchinas hiskalusim b'dover nivdal into an actual psak halachok molo hered b'inyan mikra dover ma, an actual thing that happens al pi asechel v'asvara azayis latas hamishpat shel zeh inu chesed gvur shebodavka harei ish tvuna davka yetzi la'or min hamidas shebebina.
Right.
So in other words, to bring an actual application of halacha, and in general, the basic things in Tuna is explanation and application.
Right.
So like we said before, explanation to bring it out to the sheep, and now he's saying also the application. And this is also in terms of application into doing something, not in just a dvar halacha, but like let's say you have a scientific application, understanding, like what we were talking about the Greeks.
Right.
With the steam engine, but they didn't think of applying it. The ish tvunos, what does it mean, ish tvunos? Hainu koyach hakoylet b'chit toiv le'etzem ha'asoga, means the absorption of the hasoga. Al ken mitpashet hasoga boi lasset loheru es ba kama inyonin v'dolon legamre, and that's the keser of tvuna, is the klita.
Right.
And that also, by the way, comes from the Hitbonenut, from the double nun, going over and over and over. And it means you go over and over till you understand it. If you stop there, you won't have no klita. The gambi achol to lavias ha'emek, lavias emek binoli de giloi kanal, v'dal. So there's two things now, the application and the explanation. Right?
Right.
Okay, and really he said there's basically three things. The etzem of tvuna is klita, and the power of tvuna is to spread the thing out. Generally, when we say tvuna, means downwards, either to bring it down into application, or else to bring it down into explanation to somebody else.
Right.
V'hainu b'chinas ava tatoy Yisrael saba u'tvuna. Yisrael saba is midas to chokhmah, u'tvuna midas to bina. Okay, but it's not just midas to chokhmah, midas to bina. It's a special thing. Achboin b'chinas agilu lachutz.
Right. That's the.
It's not just the midas of bina, because he just told you that the midas of bina is not tvuna. You can have midos of bina, and you can't apply them.
Right.
So in other words, the midos of bina itself is the midos of bina, how they stay inside of bina.
Right.
Tvuna is the midos of Bina, how they come out of Bina.
Right.
And it's the midos, it's not the seichel of Bina, the actual seichel, the Hitbonenut, the Chabad of Bina, is the actual Hitbonenut of Bina, which totally stays inside of itself, the Chabad of Bina. Okay, but, however, even though that Yisrael Saba and Tvuna is just a midos of Chochmah and Bina, they become a total part of 10 spheros.
Right.
In other words, in Tvuna there's also Chabad of Tvuna. Ubchinas Malchus de Tvuna, hu ha-seichel abad machshava. Hanikra oisius machshavas seichel. That's the letters of the machshavas seichel, the machshava, how it is still in the seichel. Sha-seichel mitlabish ba. In other words, that's what he's going to explain later is Leah.
Right.
V'hu b'chinas kli chitzoyni lemachshava iyunis. Shehu giloy hasoga debina atma. Mitzad etzem ha-seichel v'asvar. The machshava iyunis is the actual iyun into the thing which takes place inside the seichel. And it's enclosed in what's called the machshava seichel, which is actual letters.
Right.
So it's both almost the same thing. It's a very, very refined distinction between the machshava iyunis and machshava seichel. The machshava seichel means the machshava of the seichel. The machshava iyunis means the actual process of iyun itself, but it's really enclosed in letters. You can't have a machshava iyunis without the actual external letters of machshava seichel. But the machshava seichel comes after from Malchus of Tvuna because it takes the actual inner iyun and puts it in a dover nivdal, which is letters.
Right.
In other words, words. It puts it into actual words and concepts. Shehu gila esaga debina atzma mitzad etzem ha-seichel v'asvarachol. Umebchinas malchus tetvuna nimshach sheris eisius ha-machshava atzma shenikra Leah.
So the Malchus of Tvuna is not actually Leah itself.
It's the shirish. No, the malchus of Tvuna is still part of the etzem.
Right.
Of the etzem ha-seichel.
As it's coming out.
As it's coming out. And in terms of in terms of the worlds, the Leah is already considered basically like biyad, actual machshava dibur ma'aseh.
Right.
In other words, machshava is not part of etzem anymore, it's a lavush.
Right.
Whereas malchus of Tvuna is still part of the guf.
Right.
It's not a lavush. It's the actual inner seichel. Like, for instance, right now we're talking. The letters of speech are a totally separate lavush.
Right.
That the letters of speech is really nothing but sounds, and you see that they're traveling over the telephone. They're being turned into squiggles of electricity. And then the electricity is turned back into squiggles of air movement on your side so that your ear can hear it. And then it's turned back into squiggles of electricity in your ear that travels along your nerves and becomes back into and my speech came out of my machshava.
Right.
Which was letters, basically the same like letters of speech. It's not really part of me.
Right.
It's just that they're a little bit different. It's a more inner enclosement. It's in my brain.
Right.
And it really comes up also like letters. It gets enclosed. What is it? Kilvush? What is it? Kilvush yachlif? Like a lavush. It puts it on. It takes it off. It puts it on. It takes it off.
Right.
You know. But the malchus of Tvuna is still part of the guf. It's the actual brain.
Right.
Whereas the Leah is already sort of like talking inside of your head.
Right.
Is what it is. It's a thing of talking inside of the head, and this is all going to be explained in much later parts of the book. He's just bringing it up here. Where are we?
Who dalet rabati be'echad.
Asoga bina atmasada blah blah blah. Nikra Leah, right. Shanikra Leah. Who dalet rabosi de'echad. This tvuna, malchus tvuna, is dalet rabosi de'echad. And that's also going to be explained later. Bezeu shenikra tvuna ben ubat. The letters of tvuna, if you break them up, you get ben ubat. Kayadua. Liyos kigam betvuna yesh gimel dvarim. Eimek ve'erech ve'roichav. And basically, ben ubat means chesed and gvura.
Right.
Meaning da'as.
Right.
Like it explains later, the moach hadas splits up into two moichim, chesed and gvura. So tvuna is where the das comes from. Ben ubas, the thing into bringing it into an actual feeling of midos comes dafka from tvuna, and that's the actual mother of the children. It's the lower mother. The bina does not really bring the children directly. It's only through the lower mother. Right. גם תבונה יש גימל דברים עמק וערך וריחב העמק הוא עצם כוח התבונה הזית שבעיסה הסוגה כמו שהיא בשעה שקולטת עיסה, which is the actual klita.
Right.
The actual klita, that it gets the thing in a way of actual absorption, not just that it hops it and holds on to it. Holding on to it means you're holding on to it from the outside. Klita means you're absorbing it like a sponge.
Right.
It now becomes part of you. Uba yuchal oimak asoga na lovo lagilui kanal, and dafka through this klita, the oimek of the bina is koilet the oimek of the asoga, the oimek amusag, kanal the pasuk ish tvuna yedlena chulu. This comes dafka from the oimek. The hu yiridosa beinyan ocher anivda lahoyres boy velasas maisim rabim al yoda. Either the bringing down into a separate thing, either to teach somebody else to explain, or else to apply. Lasat maisim rabim al yada, to apply it into actual action. Va'areichav hu b'chinat itparshus hatvuna be'etzem hasoga la'archiv machshava v'kama ribu efnim sheinim v'lo k'mo shehi levad. So he's telling you really the chokhmah of the width of bina really comes from the width of tvuna. It's dafka when you have the klita that you can have the actual harchava in bina itself also.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and one other thing that he didn't mention here, but he mentioned it before, so he says since it's in bina, it's also in tvuna, the height.
Right.
There's also a height. That dafka from the koyach of the klita, you can come to understand the dover mitoch dover. And it's dafka a person who's koilet the inyan that can have that thing. And that's why it's called a noven.
Right.
And noven is actually, the root of noven is tvuna.
Right.
Not a maven. A noven means a baal tvuna.
Right.
Uma sheklula tvuna benubas, hanu ma shemitvuna dafka yivaldu hamidois, chesed and gvura begiloi mouth of ne atzman through the brain of das. Ki mebina atzma lo hayu toilus hamidos. From bina itself, there won't be a toil of the actual midah, because bina remains totally intellectual, and there's always another hand. There's always another analysis.
Right.
Alpha pisha nikras emabonim, even though it's called emabonim, because without the original Hitbonenut, there'll be no tvuna either.
Right.
Aval hi ima ilah, in a way like a grandmother. The
But
Bina
the
is really...
original source, but it's not the immediate
Yeah,
source.
in other words, the Bina is really the grandmother.
Right.
It should be called the Savta. Like Israel Saba is called the grandfather. But really, the Chochmah should be called the grandfather in another way of looking at it. Because,
Right.
and Bina should be called the grandmother because it's not the mother of the Midos. It's the
Right.
mother of the Tvuna. It's the mother of the Binos.
Right.
In other words, it's the mother of the Midos of Bina itself, which those Midos of Bina itself come out as when they come out, that's Tvuna. So really, Bina is the mother of Tvuna, really. Not the actual mother of the, what do you call it, of the Midos.
Right.
Aval hi ima ilo, it's the upper mother. Masha eken atvuna nikras ima tato, lo heilid amidus, to actually give birth to the midos, who prinas benabas, avavi yerushabayim, bitkalus, betvuna dafka. There's dafka in tvuna that all the other hands come into his kalulus to bring out the actual final midah. In other words, in Bina, it's still all in little pieces.
Right.
And you can't actually, you can't. It's just gonna as a piece here and a piece there. You can't put all the pieces together to come up with an actual product. That's dafka and tvuna. Shehi b'chinas itpashus ora bita lamata kanal. Which, if you notice, upstairs he didn't say that lamata.
Right.
But now he's making a more definition that in general what we call tvuna is dafka, meaning downwards, imatata'a. Even though the real power of tvuna, like he said before, is pashtos, is really pashut in all kind of other ways. Except in those other ways, there's other names for it. There's chokhmah of bina and bina of chokhmah and various other things. And also, like Tvuna, also same like Chokhmah and Bina have a source in Chokhmah Stima and Bina Stima. Tvuna also has a source in Tvuna Stima of Arich.
Right.
Because if there's Bina, Bina has two things. There's Bina and Tvuna. So Bina of Arich also has two things.
Right.
וגם לזה הטעם, מבחינת המויכין שבמידויס נמשך מבחינת התבונה. And that's why the moichin of the midos, like in other words, in the moichin of Zoh, comes from Tvuna, not from Bina. Moshe Ne'emar, Avaya b'chokhmah yasad aretz, the Abba yasad barta, Malchus comes from chokhmah, Chuluk, Kleinin Shamayim b'Tvuna, not b'Bina. Shamayim is Esh Shamayim, Hem B'chinas Amidos Esh Mayim Kiyadua, Chesed and Gvura. They can, Ubetvina Tekoinen. I don't know what the whole rest of the pasuk is. It will be established. Yeah, but what will be established? There's the rest of the pasuk. Shu B'chinas Kiyim Amidos, the B'chinas HaMoichin, the Tvuna Shebahem. In other words, the moichin of the midos is really it comes dafka from the tvuna. Ki tvuna k'moi memutza lahavi moichin mibchinas midos the bina b'midos shebalev. In other words, the moichin of the midos come from the midos of the moichin. So the moichin of the midos come from the midos of Bina, but in order to come out to become the moichin of the midos, they have to go through Tvuna.
Right.
And this is basically what's called the Bechain,
Right.
The moichin of the midos is the Bechain without the etzem, the seichel of Bina. Without the chabad of Bina, but rather just the midos of Bina. And that's the moichin of the midos. And that's the whole inyan of and avodas halev, you have to bring it down into the heart, because the only thing that goes through is just the end of it, which is only the bechein of it, not the actual seichel itself. Whereas in the avodas hamoichin, the whole chabad of bina comes into the midos. Shezeu kmo koyach ha'avo be'inyan ha'nivdal, that is like to bring it into something different. In other words, to bring the seichel into the midah, which a midah is something separate. It's a davar nivdal from the seichel.
Right.
I was telling you, so the power of bina does various things. One of the things it does is lohiris, to teach other people. Another thing is to apply. And the thing of to apply includes also to bring out the actual midos, to bring the seichel into an application of actual feeling.
I need to flip
So who ikar inyan?
We need to flip the tape.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who ikar inyan Hitbonenut canal?
A tvuna.
No, not the tvuna, to bring, well, yeah, tvuna, but the main thing, he's saying, the main thing of Hitbonenut is to bring it into the midos. That was the whole thing in Kuntres Hitpailus. No, the whole thing is not just to be a maskil, it's to be a ovid. Hitbonenut is avoida, not haskalah. Haskalah means it's just an intellectual thing, and you think about it intellectual, and it's a very nice intellectual thing. That's basically where most of the people make a very big mistake, that they think that this whole thing of like a Shaar HaYichud type of learning, or like Ayin Beis, it's the people who learn it are maskilim.
Right, and it's just up in the Himmel.
Up in Himmel, but avoida means to kvetch your face.
Right.
Da'as. And he's saying, no, the whole thing of the Hitbonenut is dafka tvuna, which the da'as comes dafka from tvuna.
Right.
The benu bas, which is the moyach hadas, which brings about the actual midos, that's the whole union of the Hitbonenut. And that's from tvuna, to bring the midos of bina into becoming the seichel of the midos.
Right.
And to bring about a midos. That's the whole thing, like explained in Kuntres Hitpailus. He said the whole thing that my father wanted, the Alter Rebbe, was that the Chassidim should have a Hitpailus Elokus. That's the goal. The goal is really the midos. The goal is to get excited.
Right.
Like David is doing.
Right.
The goal is not just to sit there with the, oh, well, this is very nice, so tell me, so what is Arich, and what is Atik? Oh, that's so interesting.
Right.
That's not the goal. The goal is to get fired up. And that's the goal of Avodas Halev. And the even bigger goal is to get totally fired up, where your whole brain gets fired up, which is Avodas Hamoichin, which even the thought becomes hot. The thought itself of Bina becomes hot.
Right.
And an even bigger goal is up in Atik and Arich.
Right.
That the Rutzen should get hot. The Rutzen, the Tainug, you should get a hot Rutzen and Tainug for this stuff.
Right.
In other words, to become a total addict to this. That this has to be, this is your Tainug, where you're getting your Tainug from.
Right.
And the even higher thing is the Esem HaYechida. That this is me.
Right.
This is what I am.
Right.
Like it says that by the Mittler Rebbe, if you would poke him with a needle, Chassidus will come out instead of blood.
Right.
Blood means it's your soul. The soul is in the blood.
Right. Exactly.
Means that our soul is not just that your heart is getting hot, or your head is getting hot, or your etzem harotzen, that this is your tainug, and you can't have no tainug without it. It's even more than this. It's to a point that even if you'll suffer from the Chassidus,
Right.
it's higher than the tainug. Tainug means if you get the tainug, so you want it. If you don't get the tainug, so you don't want it.
Right.
But etzem haneshama means that he's willing to die al kiddush Hashem. That's what it means, etzem haneshama. That's the whole union of Yechidah.
Right.
The whole union of Yechidah, like he explains, that even you see it even in a simple Jew, that he's willing to actually give up everything, including the Tainuk.
Right.
Why? Because this is what I really am. I'm Chassidus. That's the real. That's the highest union, and that's basically what he explains there. The pilots of the 5 levels of Naranchai.
Right.
You know, v'yadua gamken sheyesh nun kfufa v'nun pshuta bebina. So in bina itself, there's a nun pshuta and a nun kfufa, and the same thing in tvuna. And basically, as far as the general thing of bina and tvuna, the bina is the kfufa and the tvuna is the pshuta. Liyeis nun kfufa hu hareichav v'nun pshuta hu ha'erech.
Right.
V'nun hamiloi shaloi benun pshuta. The miloi of nun is with a long nun.
Right. A vav nun.
Vav nun. Masha enken b'shar miloi oisius. Now why does he say that? I can tell you another letter where it is like that. Mem.
Yeah, but a mem doesn't have a line to go down.
Okay, but it's still there's the mem psucha and mem skura.
Right.
There's 2 inyanim over there.
Right.
In the other letters like aleph doesn't end with an aleph.
Right.
And chaf doesn't end with a chaf. But mem does end with a mem. The difference between mem and nun...
A vav ends with a vav.
That's right, a vav does end with a vav. But over there's also the various things in it. The special thing of a nun is that the milui of nun is nun ve nun.
Right.
Nun and nun. A nun kfufa and a nun pshuta.
Right.
The milui of nun is a nun and a nun. That's the difference, basically.
In other words, they're connected to each other.
Means there's 2 things. It says there is this one and that one. In the mem psucha and the mem skura is 2 different levels of the same thing, really.
So the vav separates
the vav, I'm not really sure.
Them?
Both. It separates them and unites them.
Okay.
And means, when you say and, it means there's 2 things. And when you say and, it means they're connected.
Right.
Means in Bina there's 2 separate inyanim.
Right.
It's not just 2 separate levels. It's 2 separate inyanim. There's Bina and there's Tvuna.
Right.
And also the Eirech and the Reichav is like special things over here. Masha enkem b'shar miloi oisius ki ha'eirech nichlal b'reichav, because the length is included in the width. In other words, the milui of the length is included in the width. If you have the width of the whole explanations in your head, then you can bring it down to explain it to other people.
Right.
If you don't have the width, then you can't explain it. The kachu b'tvuna, and the same thing in tvuna, there's a length and a width. The amna nun hakefel be'inyin hanikra hisbonenut, kmo ami lo hisbonen. The goimer shezeu pchina pnimius bina hanikra iyon lamod al kol dover, repetitiously.
Right.
The nikra bina shebebina, double nun. Hu memutza ben bina letvuna. Like we said before, it's dafka the bina shebebina, which brings about the klita.
Right.
In other words, how do you bring about from bina to tvuna?
With the Hitbonenut,
You'll learn it another time.
right. The Hitbonenut is the amsa'i between the 2.
Right, so the Hitbonenut brings about the thing that in Bina itself he chaps the seichel. So okay, so now I chap the seichel, so how do I go to the next stage of having the tvuna of the seichel, to be able to apply it to outer things and to teach it to other people? To say, well, through Bina Shebebina. This is what he means. To say, because Bina Shebebina will bring about the klita.
Right.
There's no special power of klita. So basically what he's telling you is that Bina Shebebina is the main power of all the powers.
Right, that's the linchpin.
It's not just the linchpin, it's the one that's in your hands. The other powers are not really in your hands.
Right.
Even the power of das, which is partially in your hands, like you can force yourself to concentrate on something. It's still really dafka from Bina Shebebina, because basically if you, even by like the Avodah Zarniks that just meditate on a candle or something like that, the reason they do it is because of an understanding that they have. It's a wrong understanding, but you see that like all of these forums that tell you to, meditate on the emptiness and stuff like that.
Right.
In the forum, they're doing an explanation.
Right.
They're not doing a meditation. And the reason they're doing this because they did a Hitbonenut. In other words, they did an analysis of the thing and came up, and this is, by the way, where the whole Inyan of Toyu started. The Shvira starts in Sag of Sag.
Right.
Bina Shebebina, in the Hitbonenut.
Right.
And that's the root of all the Malachim. And that's basically the real eighth king of Toihu. Not the Shema HaChodesh. Shema HaChodesh is where it becomes Metukan already.
Right.
Tikkun. That's the source of Tikkun.
Right.
It's not a Toihu thing. But the Shvira is in where they did this Hitbonenut of this and that and something else, and they decided that since you want to really get to the Chokhmah, that's what we want to get to. And the real thing is the Hitpailus and the Chokhmah, which is above Bina and below Bina.
Right.
So how do you get to them? With Das. But the real thing that he's saying is Davka Bina Shubina is the Mamutza Bein Bina Latvuna Al Yedei Nuna Pshuta.
Okay, so the Shvira is in the Bechain.
Huh?
The Shvira is in the Bechain.
In the Bechain, right. The Shvira is in the Bechain. Therefore, in the analysis, in Bina itself, it says basically that in Bina itself there's no Shvira.
Right.
But really it is. The Shvira is in the Midos of Bina, in the decision that he came up with. In Bina itself, meaning in the Chabad of Bina, there's no actual, like
meaning in Bina Shababina there isn't a real Shvira.
There isn't a real Shvira, but that's really the source of the Shvira.
That's the source of the Shvira.
The source of the Shvira. Like for instance, let's say the pro-choice people in their analysis. Yeah, there seems to be famines in the world and overpopulation and gangs and stuff like that. So that's true. I agree with that. So what should we do? So I would say, well, we should study Chassidus. They say, well, let's kill all the babies. The Bechain is where the Shvira is.
Right.
So that's the Mutza Ben Bina Latvuna, al yidei nun pshuta, shemechamos nikra Hitbonenut chulu v'dai lamevin. And it's dafka through the nun pshuta, through the eirech of Bina itself. In other words, in the Bina, the Hitbonenut itself is really the nun pshuta. In Bina, Chokhmah of Bina is the wit, to come up with all kinds of new things. But in order to have the Klita, it's dafka not through coming up with new things. is by going over the same explanation another time. Through going this Eirech one more time.
Right.
Not, okay, fine. We understood it, so now let's go and learn another book. That's a Reichav.
Right.
That will not bring about the Klita.
Right.
The Klita will come Davka from learning this book once over again, as any college student knows. That if you want to absorb the material, you have to read it another time.
Right.
Not go to the Reicha, but this same explanation, this same Eirech, you're going to have to go through it again. And it's Davka, so it's Davka Bina Shababina. So now basically what he explained up to now, in the first chapter he explained how Bina Shababina is the one that activates all the powers higher than it.
Right.
And then Das he sort of explained separately, but he didn't explain exactly how it gets activated.
Right.
Now he explained that Das, Ben Ubas, gets activated Davka from Tuna.
Right.
Okay, but Tvuna gets activated Davka from Bina Shababina, from going over the length one more time.
Right.
And that's also the thing that explains what's the difference between Oived and Shalo Avdoi in Tanya.
Right.
That,
he does it 101 times.
That he did it 101 times.
Right.
And why is it when he did it 100 times, it's called that he didn't Lo Avdoi? Besides the fact that he didn't put an effort into it, that was their habit, but there's this other thing that we're talking about here, the difference between Avoida and Haskalah. The 100 times was to understand the Indian.
Right.
The 101 time, that's what made him a Ovid, rather than just a maskil.
Right.
That's what brought about the Da'as into the thing. And the thing that it went into his Midos came Davka from the 101st time. Because the 101st time is where he already understood it, because that's why they learn 100 times, to understand it properly.
Right.
And then the 101st time, that's where the Klita started.
Right.
Because you already understood it. So what do you mean? I learned it 100 times already. Says, yeah, you learned it 100 times. You understand it. Very good. You're a maskil. But as far as a Ovid, you're not considered a Ovid. Because you have no Das into it. Because the Das comes from Tvuna. You have no Midos. Your Midos are not mispoiled.
Right.
You didn't bring it down into the Midos, which is the whole Indian of Avodah. Right?
Right.
Okay. And like he says here, V'dai Maven. So now we can go back to the Q&As.
Yeah, let me turn off the tape.
Yeah, turn off the tape.